The mating ceremony was in 20 minutes. 20 minutes! I'd counted them 3 times already, standing in the narrow corridor outside Jaewon's preparation chamber, my fingers pressed flat against the cool stone wall, like it was the only thing keeping me vertical. Which, honestly, it kind of was. My name is Shin Dae-oh, Omega, 24 years old, blessed or cursed, depending on who you ask, with the ability to read minds. Yes, read minds. Every stray thought, every buried secret, every ugly little thing people smile over in polite company. I hear all of it. Always have. It's like living inside a radio station that never, ever turns off. I'd learned early how to build walls around it, how to filter the noise, how to smile at someone while their thoughts screamed something completely different at me. I was good at pretending I didn't know things, which made what I was hearing right now so much worse. Because I wasn't even trying to listen. I'd just been walking past, white ceremonial hanbok rustling, heart stupidly full, 20 minutes away from bonding my life to the man I thought loved me, when Chaewon's voice bled through the door like smoke through a crack. And his thoughts? His thoughts were already screaming. Once the bonding mark is sealed, the Shin estate transfers automatically. Old pack law. His grandfather's territory, the mountain land, the Seoul compound, all of it folds into my name. Hyun-soo, this is the most brilliant thing I've ever done. I stopped walking. My ceremonial shoes, hand-embroidered, pale gold, something I'd cried over when I first saw them, went completely still on the stone floor. Very quiet, very careful. I told myself I'd misheard, that my ability was malfunctioning, that grief does strange things to people, and I'd been grieving my grandfather, Shin Chol-soo, for exactly 4 months, 3 weeks in 2 days. And maybe that grief had finally cracked something loose in my head. Then Hyun-soo laughed, that wet, satisfied laugh I'd always found vaguely reptilian, and Chaewon kept going. He's so desperate to be loved. Did you see his face when I proposed? Like I'd handed him the sun. Pathetic, honestly. 1 heat cycle, 1 staged confession, and he handed me his whole heart. The Omega who can read minds, Hyun-soo said, amused. And he never once read yours? I'm careful, always have been. He hears surface thoughts. I keep the real ones buried. Besides, he wants to believe. That's his weakness. He wants it to be real so badly that he filters out everything that isn't. I stood there in that corridor, 20 minutes from becoming this man's bonded mate, and I did something I almost never do. I reached past my own walls. I pushed. And Jaewon-oh's mind opened up like a filing cabinet someone had kicked off a building. 4 months. He'd been tracking the estate proceedings for 4 months. Since before my grandfather's body was cold. He'd researched pack inheritance law, consulted 3 separate lawyers, and identified the exact bonding clause that would transfer territorial rights upon a sealed mating mark. He'd targeted me, deliberately. Not because I was Dae-oh, not because of anything I'd said or done or been, but because I was the last Shin Omega, and my grandfather's land was worth more than most people make in 3 lifetimes. The proposal in the Bukchong garden? Staged. The nights he held me while I cried about grandfather? Calculated. The way he always smelled like cedar and warmth when my anxiety spiked. Like he'd somehow known exactly what scent would calm me down. He'd researched that too. Had someone pull my childhood scent comfort records from the Pack Medical Archive. I want you to understand something. I can read minds. I have spent my entire life being told that makes me dangerous, invasive, too much. I've been careful, ethical. I built walls so other people could have privacy because I knew what it felt like to have none. And the one person I chose to trust, the one person I chose not to read, had been laughing at me the entire time. Somewhere inside the chamber, Chae-won straightened his collar. I felt his satisfaction sitting in his chest like a warm coal. 19 minutes. I pressed my back against that wall, my white hanbok glowing softly in the corridor light, and I made a decision. I was not going to cry. I was not going to run. I was going to walk into that ceremony. And by the time it was over, Chae-won-oh was going to wish he'd chosen literally anyone else to betray. The man tried to steal from someone who can hear thoughts. Rookie mistake. I wish I could say I'd always known that somewhere deep in my gut, behind all those carefully constructed walls, some instinct had been quietly waving a red flag the entire time. But that would be a lie, and I'd had enough of those today. 4 months ago, I was not okay. I want to be honest about that. Shin Dae-oh, the Omega who hears everything, was walking around Seoul like a cracked phone screen, still functioning, technically, but one wrong pressure away from shattering completely. Grandfather Chol-soo had been my entire world, not in a soft, sentimental way, in a structural way, the way a building needs a foundation. He was the one person whose thoughts had always been exactly what his face said: warm, steady, proud, no hidden layers, no buried cruelty. Do you know how rare that is for someone like me? When he died, I didn't just lose a person. I lost the only mind in my life that had ever felt like quiet. I met Chae-won-oh at a packed social gathering in Insadong, 43 days after the funeral. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My best friend Park Sung-min had essentially dragged me out of my grandfather's Seoul compound, wearing an expression that said, "You've been staring at that man's teacup for 11 days, and I am genuinely concerned." Sung-min wasn't wrong. I had been staring at the teacup. Grief is weird. The gathering was the usual mix of packed formality and barely concealed social climbing. I'd put my walls up the moment I walked in, full filter, maximum capacity. Because pack events are essentially a buffet of thoughts I never asked to hear. Chae-won had approached me near the garden wall. He was handsome, I'll give him that. Tall, clean-lined features, the kind of alpha presence that makes a room slightly rearrange itself around him. His surface thoughts had been calm, almost unusually calm, just a quiet, pleasant hum of, "He looks interesting," and "I wonder if he's cold," standing so close to the wall. I'd thought that was sincerity. It was rehearsal. He'd asked about my grandfather, not in the way people usually do, that careful, tiptoeing around the grave like grief is contagious. He'd asked directly, what was he like? What did he love? What did he build? And I, like an absolute fool, had talked. I talked for 40 minutes about grandfather's laugh, about the mountain territory and the way the fog settled over it in October, about the old pack laws he'd preserved when everyone else was modernizing them away, about how he used to say that an Omega's bond was the most powerful force in any pack, not because of submission, but because of choice. Chae-won had listened with his whole body. I thought that meant he cared. It meant he was cataloging. The relationship had moved the way a slow tide moves, gradually, then all at once. Weekly tea, then walks through Bukchon Hanok village, then late calls that stretched past midnight. Sung-min had raised exactly one eyebrow at me across a cafe table about 6 weeks in, which in Park Sung-min language translates roughly to, "I have concerns, but I'm choosing to support you." I'd waved him off. I was happy, genuinely, stupidly happy. For the first time since grandfather died, someone's presence felt like relief instead of noise. Chae-won proposed 3 months later. In the Bukchon garden, of all places. He'd somehow learned it was where grandfather used to take me as a child. He'd gotten down on one knee with a pale jade ring, the Shin pack color, and his surface thoughts had been so perfectly, beautifully composed. Just warmth, just want, just please say yes. I said yes. I never pushed deeper. And here's the part that truly, genuinely humiliates me. I knew I was being careful not to invade his privacy. I thought I was being respectful, ethical, giving him the grace I wish people gave me. What I was actually doing was protecting a lie he'd built specifically for someone like me. He hadn't suppressed his real thoughts by accident. He'd trained for me, researched omega telepathy, learned exactly how deep a surface thought sits versus a buried one. He'd built a version of himself designed to pass my inspection. Standing in that corridor now, with 19 minutes ticking down, and his real thoughts still echoing through my skull like broken glass, I understood something cold and clarifying. Chaewon-oh had not fallen in love with me. He'd studied me. Somewhere in that study, he'd made one critical error. He'd assumed that because I wanted to believe, I would keep choosing to. He didn't know me at all. Which was fine. Actually, no, it was not fine. Nothing about this was fine. I was standing in a ceremonial corridor in hand-embroidered shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent, wearing a hanbok that grandfather's tailor had spent 3 weeks constructing, with 17 minutes left before I was supposed to walk into a bonding hall and permanently mark my soul to a man who had essentially written a thesis on how to manipulate me. Totally fine, perfectly normal Saturday. I pushed off the wall. My legs were steadier than they had any right to be. That's the thing about growing up hearing everyone's worst thoughts. You develop a very high threshold for shock. My nervous system had essentially been through a lifetime of emotional turbulence before I turned 15. This was bad, yes. This was arguably the worst thing that had ever happened to me. But I was still standing. Grandfather always said that was the Shin way. The first thing I needed was Sung-min, not because I was falling apart. I want to be very clear about that. I was maybe 12% falling apart. Sung-min's preparation room was 2 doors down from mine, which I had always considered a comfort and now considered a logistical blessing. I moved down the corridor quickly, quietly, the soft fabric of my hanbok whispering against the floor. His thoughts reached me before I even knocked. Sung-min was thinking about rice cakes, specifically whether the catering team had included the ones with the red bean filling, because in his words, mentally, if they skip the red bean ones again, I will simply and calmly lose my mind. I loved him so much it physically hurt. I knocked twice. "It's open," he called. I walked in and closed the door behind me. Sung-min was sitting at the small mirror table, adjusting his collar, and he took one look at my face in the reflection, and his rice cake thoughts evaporated instantly. "Dae-oh." His voice was careful. "What happened?" Not a question. Sung-min had known me for 11 years. He knew the difference between my resting expression and my "I have just received catastrophic information" expression. "I need you to not panic," I said. That sentence has never once preceded good news. "Jaewon is marrying me for the estate." Silence. Sung-min turned around slowly in his chair. His thoughts were moving very fast, cycling through denial, fury, protectiveness, and something that felt dangerously close to, "I knew it, I knew it, I knew it." But his face stayed eerily calm. "Say that again," he said quietly. I read his mind. I sat down on the edge of the nearest chair, keeping my voice low and level. Not on purpose. I was walking past his preparation chamber and his thoughts just leaked. He's been tracking the Shin estate inheritance clause for months. The bonding mark triggers an automatic territorial transfer under old Pak law. He's known since before he proposed. Sung-min stood up. "Park Sung-min," I said firmly, "sit down. I am going to walk into that chamber, and I am going to rearrange his entire—" "Sung-min." He stopped, looked at me, read something in my expression that made him slowly, reluctantly sit back down. I'm not running, I said. I'm not canceling the ceremony from the outside while he stands there playing the wounded alpha. I'm not giving him a single second of confusion to spin this into something that makes me look unstable. Sung-min's jaw was tight. Then what are you doing? Small, sharp smile. I'm thinking. His eyebrows rose slightly. That face right there is the face you made before you completely dismantled Councilman Ryu's fake territorial claim at the PAC assembly last year. Councilman Ryu should not have tried to file fraudulent boundary documents in a room containing me. My point, Sung-min said, is that face means someone is about to have a very bad day. Jae-won-oh, I said simply, is about to have the worst day of his life. Sung-min exhaled slowly. His thoughts were still furious, but underneath the fury was something steadier now. Trust. The particular quiet trust of someone who has watched you win before. What do you need? He asked. I opened my mouth to answer, and then someone knocked on the door. 3 sharp knocks, deliberate, not the wedding coordinator's frantic tap, not the soft double knock of a PAC attendant. These were the knocks of someone who knew exactly where they were going and why. Sung-min and I exchanged a look. His thoughts said, "Who is that?" Mine said the same thing. I crossed to the door and opened it. The man standing in the corridor was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in deep charcoal ceremonial dress that bore no PAC insignia I recognized. His scent hit me a half-second later. Pine resin, cold mountain air, something ancient underneath it all. His eyes found mine immediately. "Shin Dae-oh," he said. "My name is Kang Tae-yang. We need to talk right now." I stared at him for exactly 3 seconds. Because here is the thing about strange alphas who show up uninvited to your bonding ceremony 14 minutes before it begins and announce that you need to talk right now. They either have genuinely critical information or they are having some kind of episode. I reached toward his mind carefully. His thoughts were the most organized I had ever encountered in an alpha, not suppressed like Jae-won's calculated blankness. Organized, structured, like a room where everything had a place and everything was currently in it. The top layer said, clearly and without decoration, he needs to hear this before that ceremony starts. Every second matters. No performance, no agenda underneath the agenda, just urgency, clean and direct. I hated that I already trusted him slightly. "You have 3 minutes, I said, and you're going to talk fast." Tae-yang stepped inside. Sung-min closed the door, positioning himself near it with the specific energy of someone who had decided he was a bouncer now and was fully committed to the role. Tae-yang didn't waste time sitting down. "I'm an investigator," he said, "independent. I specialize in PAC law violations and inheritance fraud. 6 weeks ago, I was hired to look into Jae-won-oh's financial and legal activity following a tip from a source inside his legal team." "Who hired you?" I asked. His eyes met mine. "Your grandfather." The room went very still. "My grandfather has been dead for 4 months. He hired me 4 months and 12 days ago," Tae-yang said. 3 days before he died. He'd already suspected someone was researching the estate inheritance clause. He didn't know who yet, but he knew the old PAC law made you vulnerable the moment the bonding mark sealed. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and produced a folded document. He left instructions and a letter for you. Carefully did not reach for it immediately, because if I reached for it, that made it real. That meant grandfather had spent the last days of his life worried about me, protecting me from a threat he'd seen coming before I had. And I was not going to fall apart in front of a stranger in a corridor 14 minutes before the worst ceremony of my life. I took the document. Tae-yang continued while I unfolded it. "Jae-won-oh has done this before, not with an omega. 2 years ago, he identified a low-ranking alpha in Busan with a significant land inheritance, cultivated a close friendship, and convinced him to sign a joint territory agreement. When the Alpha realized what he'd signed, the legal extraction took 8 months and nearly broke him financially. Sung-min made a sound that was technically words, but functioned as a full paragraph of fury. "The Pusan Alpha," I said, eyes still moving across the document. "Did he recover?" "Eventually, but Jae-won walked away clean. No pact council violation because it was technically consensual signature." Taeyang's voice tightened slightly. "He's careful. He doesn't break laws visibly. He finds the edges, and he lives there." Charming hobby. "There's more." He produced a second document. Jae-won has a secondary bond application filed with the Gyeongbukgung PAC registry. It was submitted 2 months ago under a provision that allows an Alpha to pre-register a territorial absorption claim contingent on a completed bonding mark. The moment your ceremony finalizes, his lawyers have automatic filing authority. I looked up from grandfather's letter, so it wouldn't even require him to ask me to sign anything afterward. Correct. The bonding mark itself would function as consent under the old law provision. His team found a clause that hasn't been actively used in 60 years because most pacts modernize past it. Taeyang's jaw was set. Your grandfather's territory, the Seoul compound, and the northern mountain land. All of it. Automatic transfer within 72 hours of the ceremony. I folded the document carefully, set it on the table beside me with the same precision I used when I was doing something with my hands, so I didn't do something else with them. 13 minutes, I said. Taeyang nodded, which is why I'm here now instead of after. I looked at him directly, pushed gently at the surface of his thoughts again. Still organized, still clean. Underneath the urgency was something else now, something I hadn't expected from someone I'd met 4 minutes ago. Anger on my behalf. Not performed, not strategic. Just genuine, quiet outrage at what had been done to someone he'd never met. You said you were hired, I said. My grandfather paid you. He did. And the job technically ended when he died. Taeyang held my gaze without flinching. The job ended when you were safe. That was his instruction. Sung-min from his position by the door cleared his throat. I want to formally state that I like this man. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Don't encourage him, I said. Then someone knocked on the door again. Different knock this time. 2 sets of 3, synchronized perfectly, like 2 people had agreed on it beforehand. Taeyang turned toward the door. His expression shifted into something that looked almost like relief. That would be the others, he said. I blinked. The others? Matter of fact, I didn't come alone. Flat stare. I looked at Taeyang for a long moment. Define others. He didn't answer immediately, which was either because he was choosing his words carefully or because he understood that what he was about to say required a small buffer of silence before impact. Sung-min opened the door. 2 men stepped in. The first was lean and sharp-featured, with a kind of quiet intensity that made a room feel immediately smaller. He wore dark ceremonial dress, his black hair slightly disheveled like he'd been moving fast. His scent reached me a beat after his eyes did. Ink, cedarwood, and something electric underneath, like the air right before lightning. The second was broader, warmer-looking, with an easy stance that didn't match the seriousness in his eyes. His scent was different entirely. Sandalwood, riverstone, and something almost like sunlight on dry grass. He carried a leather document case in one hand and wore the expression of someone who had been awake for approximately 30 hours and had made peace with it. The sharp one's thoughts were fast and precise. 12 minutes. We have 12 minutes. Focus. The warm one's thoughts were layered. He's smaller than I expected. He looks exhausted. He's holding himself together with sheer stubbornness. I respect that enormously. Involuntarily touched, slightly annoyed about it. I filed that away and crossed my arms. Names, I said, quickly. The sharp one spoke first. Lim Hyun Jae, Pak Law Attorney. I specialize in inheritance fraud and territorial claim disputes. He was already opening the document case. I have 3 things you need to see and approximately 11 minutes to walk you through them. The warm one nodded once. Oh, Seok-hyun, I was your grandfather's personal financial advisor for 9 years. He contacted me the same week he contacted Tae-young. His voice was steady and unhurried despite the timeline. I've been building the legal counter case for 6 weeks. I turned to look at Tae-young. My grandfather, I said carefully, assembled a team. He assembled a very specific team, Tae-young confirmed. He said if it ever came to this, you'd need more than a warning. You'd need a wall. Something moved in my chest that I refused to name right then. Sung-min, from behind the 2 new arrivals, caught my eye and mouthed, 3 alphas. I mouthed back, I can see that. He mouthed, grandfather really loved you. I looked away before my face did something embarrassing. Hyun-jae spread 3 documents across the table in fast, practiced movements. First, he said, pointing to the top sheet, the secondary bond application Tae-young told you about. We have a certified copy. It's filed, it's real, and it names the Shin Northern Territory, the Seoul compound, and 2 subsidiary parcels your grandfather acquired in Gyeonggi-do. I studied it. My grandfather's pack seal was referenced in the filing. Seeing it there, used as a target rather than a legacy, made something cold settle in my stomach. Second, Hyun-jae moved to the next document. Jaewon's legal team drafted a post-ceremony asset consolidation agreement. This was meant to be presented to you within 48 hours of the bonding mark as a routine administrative step. The language buries the territorial transfer inside standard household financial unification clauses. So even after he had a backup plan to make me sign something I didn't fully understand. Correct. Because the automatic transfer only covers PAC territory. The private assets, the liquid estate, the compound furnishings and archive, those required a separate signature. He was planning to walk you through it while you were still in post-bond neurochemical softness. Post-bond neurochemical softness. The technical term for the emotional openness that follows a completed mating bond. The way a newly bonded omega's defenses lower naturally because their body believes they're safe. He had timed it for when I would be at my most trusting. He really did his research. Thoroughly, Seok-hyun said, his voice carrying the particular weight of someone who had spent 6 weeks being furious on someone else's behalf. Third document, he nodded to Hyun-jae. The third sheet was different. Financial records, transactions, dates, and one name I recognized in the transfer column. That's Hyun-soo, I said, Jaewon's best man, who is also, Seok-hyun said, a junior partner at the law firm that filed the secondary bond application. He's been part of this since the beginning, not just a friend, an architect. So Hyun-soo wasn't just laughing along in that preparation chamber, he was invested. Something shifted in my expression. Sung-min read it immediately. Dae-oh, I'm fine, I said. You have your planning face. I always have my planning face. This one is sharper than usual. I turned to the 3 men arranged in my preparation room like grandfather had personally sent them, which effectively he had. 9 minutes, I said. Tell me exactly what we can do in 9 minutes. Tae-young looked at Hyun-jae. Hyun-jae looked at Seok-hyun. Steady, unified. All 3 of them smiled. When 3 alphas who barely know you smile in perfect unison, one of 2 things is happening. Either they have a genuinely brilliant plan, or someone is about to suggest something that sounds insane, and they're bracing for my reaction. Based on the next 30 seconds, it was both. Hyun-jae spoke first, crisp and efficient. The bonding ceremony uses the traditional confirmation sequence. Officiant speaks, both parties give verbal consent, Mark is sealed, correct? Correct, I said. Under Gyeongbokgung Pak Law, Article 14, Clause 9, verbal consent must be given freely and without evidence of prior fraudulent intent by either party. He tapped the secondary bond application on the table. This document constitutes documented fraudulent intent. If it is presented to the officiating elder before consent is given, the ceremony cannot legally proceed. The ceremony gets stopped, officially, on record. Not just stopped, Seokyun added, invalidated at the source. Chaewon can't refile for a bonding claim against the Shin estate for a minimum of 5 years while the fraud case is reviewed by the PAC registry. And Hyun-soo? I asked. Hyun-jae's expression sharpened. His involvement as a law firm partner in a fraudulent filing is a disbarment-level violation. We submit the financial records to the PAC legal board today. His career ends before the reception would have started. I looked at all three of them, quietly, with feeling. Grandfather built you like weapons. Taeyang said nothing, but something in his expression shifted, just briefly, into something that wasn't quite professional distance anymore. I filed that away too. 8 minutes. Sung-min was already moving, gathering the documents into a neat stack, with the focused energy of someone who had been waiting his entire friendship with me for a moment this satisfying. Who presents to the officiant? I asked. Hyun-jae, Taeyang said. He has the legal standing. The elder is required to receive and review any documented fraud claim before proceeding. Does the elder know any of you? Elder Choi Bum-seok, Seokhyun said. He and your grandfather were colleagues for 30 years. He doesn't know we're coming, but he knew Chol-soo. He'll listen. Something warm and painful moved through my chest simultaneously. Grandfather had built this carefully, not just quickly, not just desperately. He thought about who would listen, who could be trusted, who loved him enough to honor his last request without needing to understand every piece. What do? I asked. Taeyang looked at me directly. You walk into that ceremony hall exactly as planned. You stand at your position. You let Jaewon believe everything is fine for exactly as long as it takes Hyun-jae to reach Elder Choi. So I have to stand next to the man who tried to steal my entire inheritance and look normal. For approximately 4 minutes, Taeyang said. I read minds for a living, I said. I once sat through a 3-hour PAC council meeting while Councilman Ryu fantasized about his stamp collection the entire time. I think I can manage 4 minutes. Sung-min covered his mouth. His thoughts were pure, delighted laughter. Hyun-jae tucked the documents into a slim inner case. Seokhyun straightened his jacket. Taeyang looked at me with that organized, steady gaze that I was finding increasingly difficult to be annoyed by. When it stops, I said, and Chaewon realizes what's happened, what then? Then it's public, Hyun-jae said simply. The hall will be full. The elder will be required to state the reason for the invalidation on record. Every PAC member present will hear the fraud claim read aloud. I thought about Chaewon's face in that moment, the precise second he understood that his carefully constructed plan had collapsed, not in private, not quietly, not in a way he could spin later, but in front of everyone who had ever respected him. Good. One more thing, Seokhyun said, his voice dropping slightly. He reached into his jacket and produced a small, folded envelope. My name was on the front in handwriting I would have recognized anywhere. Grandfather's handwriting. He said to give you this one last, Seokhyun said quietly. After you knew everything. Not before. I took it. I did not open it yet. I pressed it once against my chest like a small, private acknowledgement, then tucked it carefully inside my hanbok. Later, after. All right, I said, straightening, composed, dangerous. I smoothed my hanbok, picked up my ceremonial cord, looked at 4 people in a small room who had shown up for me. 3 of them strangers, one of them my oldest friend, all of them steady. Let's go remind Chaewon-oh, I said, why you should never build a trap in a house where the owner can read your mind. Sung-min fell into step beside me. Under his breath, he whispered, "Grandfather is absolutely watching this and losing it with joy right now." "I know," I said, and I walked toward the ceremony hall like I owned every stone in it, which, technically, I still did. Hey, if you've made it this far, you already know this story is different. Dae-oh isn't running. He isn't crying in a corner. He is walking into that hall with 3 alphas at his back and a plan that would make his grandfather proud. Subscribe right now so you don't miss what happens when Chaewon realizes the trap has already closed. Trust me, the ceremony scene will leave your jaw on the floor. Now back to the story. The ceremony hall was everything grandfather had imagined for me. I knew that because he had described it once, sitting in the compound garden on a warm evening, his hands wrapped around a cup of barley tea, his voice quiet and certain. He'd said when the time came, he wanted the hall filled with pale lantern light and white chrysanthemums. He wanted the old confirmation sequence, not the modernized version. He wanted it to feel like something that meant something. It did, just not the way either of us had planned. The hall stretched long and warm ahead of me, packed with pack members seated in neat rows. Lantern light moved softly across the walls. White chrysanthemums cascaded from every pillar. The ceremonial dais at the far end glowed under 3 hanging lamps. An elder Choi Bum-seok stood at its center in his formal gray robes, his face composed and dignified. Chaewon stood to the right of the dais. He looked perfect, composed, handsome, his dark ceremonial hanbok pressed and exact. His surface thoughts, the ones he always kept polished for company, hummed with practiced warmth. I walked in and his eyes found me immediately. Underneath the warmth, buried exactly where he always kept it, his real thoughts ticked like a clock. Almost there. Keep smiling. I kept my face completely neutral. Keep smiling, Jaewon. You've earned this next part. Sung-min peeled off to take his seat. I moved forward alone, the chrysanthemum scent thick and sweet around me. Every step measured and unhurried. I could feel the attention of the room like a physical weight. Pack members who had known my grandfather, cousins, elders, friends who had cried at his funeral and smiled at my engagement. All of them watching. Good. I reached the dais and took my position. Chaewon turned to face me fully. Up close, his eyes were warm and attentive and completely manufactured. "You look incredible," he murmured, low enough for only me. "Thank you," I said. His thoughts registered mild surprise at my calm. He'd expected some trace of nerves, some emotional softness he could lean into. He found nothing to grip. Somewhere behind me, near the elder's approach corridor, I caught the faintest edge of Hyunjae's thoughts. "Elder is reading. Reading. Come on." I kept breathing. Elder Choi stepped forward and the hall settled into the deep, particular silence of ceremony. "We gather today," the elder began, his voice carrying the resonance of decades, "to witness the bonding of Shin Dae-oh and Oh Jae-won under the old confirmation rite." Chaewon's expression was reverent, practiced to the last degree. "Before the confirmation sequence begins," Elder Choi continued, and something in his cadence shifted almost imperceptibly. "This officiant is required to acknowledge that a formal documentation claim has been submitted for review under PAC Law Article 14, Clause 9. The silence changed. It went from ceremonial quiet to something else entirely, something with texture and weight. Chaewon's surface thoughts cracked, just slightly. "What?" Elder Choi's voice remained steady. "A claim of documented fraudulent intent has been presented to this officiant prior to the verbal consent sequence. Under PAC law, this officiant is required to state the nature of the claim on record before any ceremony may proceed. The hall was absolutely still. I watched Jae-won's face in real time. The warmth flickered, his jaw held. His eyes moved just once, quickly, to the side corridor where Hyun-jae stood with the document case. His thoughts stopped being quiet. No, no, that's impossible. How did he... Who... Elder Choi unfolded the document. His voice did not waver. A secondary bond application was filed with the Gyeongbokgung Pak Registry 2 months prior to this ceremony by Oh Jae-won, citing the Shin Pak territory, Seoul compound, and Northern Mountain Land as contingent absorption claims upon bonding mark completion. He looked up. This filing constitutes premeditated fraudulent intent under Article 14. This ceremony cannot legally proceed. The hall erupted. Not loudly, not in chaos, in the particular eruption of a large group of people, gasping, turning, whispering, all at the same moment, like a stone dropped into still water. Chae-won turned to me. His composure was gone. All of it, the warmth, the practiced tenderness, the manufactured steadiness, gone. What was underneath was ugly and cornered and desperate. Dae-oh, he said, low and tight, this is a misunderstanding. Whatever you think you heard, whatever someone told you, I didn't need anyone to tell me anything, I said calmly. I read your mind, Chae-won. I read it 4 months ago and chose not to believe what I found because I wanted to trust you. My voice stayed even. That was my mistake. I won't be making it again. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. The entire hall was watching. Elder Choi's voice cut through the silence like a blade wrapped in silk. Oh, Chae-won, you will respond to this claim on record. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. I watched him calculate. That was the thing about being able to read minds. I didn't just hear thoughts. I felt the architecture of them. The way a person's thinking moves when they're genuinely surprised versus when they're buying time. Chae-won's mind right now was not panicking. It was reorganizing. He was looking for another angle. Even now, standing on a collapsing platform in front of every pack member who had ever respected him, some part of Jae-won-oh was still searching for the exit that let him walk away intact. Almost impressed, deeply disgusted. This document, he said finally, his voice finding steadiness from somewhere, was filed as a precautionary measure, standard legal protection for an alpha entering a bond with a significant estate. He spread his hands, the picture of reasonable calm. It's not fraudulent intent. It's responsible planning. A murmur moved through the hall. My jaw tightened, just slightly. He was good. I would give him that. Even cornered, even caught, he could reframe a weapon as a tool and make it sound sensible. Elder Choi's expression didn't shift. The filing names specific Shin territories as absorption targets contingent on bond completion. This office requires clarification on whether the bonding party, Shin Dae-oh, was made aware of this filing at any point prior to today. Every head in the hall turned toward me. No, I said clearly, I was not. That's not, Chae-won started. Were you going to tell me? I asked. Conversational, almost gentle. After the ceremony? During the post-bond administrative phase, perhaps, when my neurochemistry was soft and I was statistically more likely to sign documents without reading them carefully? The hall went very, very quiet. Chae-won's careful composure finally, visibly fractured. You have no idea what you're talking about, he said, and the warmth was entirely gone now. The voice underneath was clipped and cold and real. You want to stand here and embarrass both of us in front of the entire pack because of a legal filing you don't have the context to understand? I have a law degree, Hyun-jae said from the side corridor, not moving from his position. He has the context. Someone in the seated rows made a sound that was almost a laugh, quickly stifled. That was the moment Hyun-soo stood up. I had been waiting for this. He'd been seated in the front row, Chae-won's best man, the junior partner who had filed the application and laughed in that preparation chamber and helped architect every piece of this. He stood up with the specific energy of someone who had decided the only remaining option was to be loud about it. "This is a coordinated attack," he said, projecting toward the elder. "These men appeared today without invitation, with documents that could easily be fabricated, targeting an alpha on the most significant day of his life. This should be investigated before any claims are taken as..." "The financial records submitted alongside the claim," Seok-hyun said, stepping forward from where he'd been standing quietly near the back wall, his voice calm and carrying, "include transaction logs from your firm's billing system. 17 separate entries over 6 months. Shall I read them aloud?" Hyun-soo sat down. Chae-won looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time since I had known him, his thoughts weren't organized or suppressed or carefully constructed. They were just loud. How did he know? How long has he known? Was any of it real to him? Did he ever actually? And there it was, buried under the fraud and the calculation and the cold architecture of everything he'd built. A question he hadn't meant to ask. Did he ever love me? Something complicated moved through my chest. Not softness, not forgiveness, just the particular ache of understanding that even people who use you can sometimes lose track of the line between performance and feeling. That somewhere in 4 months of calculated tenderness, some small, stupid part of Chae-won-oh had started to believe his own fiction. It didn't excuse a single thing, but it made him human. And being human while doing something monstrous was somehow worse than being simply monstrous. "No," I said, answering the question he hadn't spoken aloud. His eyes widened. "I didn't love you," I said. "I loved who I thought you were. That person didn't exist, so no, there's nothing here to save." The hall was completely silent. Chae-won's mouth pressed into a thin line. Something behind his eyes shuddered permanently. He looked at Elder Choi, then at the documents, then at the rows of pack members watching him with expressions ranging from shock to something colder. He straightened his jacket. "I'll be contesting this ruling." "You're welcome to," Hyun-jae said pleasantly. "I'll be there." Chae-won stepped off the dais. Every eye in the hall followed him. Hyun-soo fell into step beside him without looking at anyone, and the two of them walked toward the exit with the specific dignity of people who had none left. The doors closed behind them. I stood on the dais alone in the chrysanthemum light and took one long, slow breath. The letter in my handbook pressed warm against my chest. Grandfather's handwriting. Later, I had promised myself. After. Tae-young's voice reached me from the corridor, quiet and even. "Dae-oh." I turned. All three of them were looking at me with the same expression. Not pity, not triumph, just, "We're here. What do you need?" Something in me, something that had been clenched tight since that corridor wall, finally loosened. What did I need? Genuinely interesting question. 20 minutes ago, I had been standing in a corridor in hand-embroidered shoes, holding myself together with sarcasm and stubbornness, preparing to walk into the worst ceremony of my life. Now I was standing on a dais, surrounded by white chrysanthemums. The fraud had collapsed publicly on record. The villain had walked himself out, and 3 alphas my grandfather had assembled like a very specific emergency kit were looking at me with careful, steady eyes. Normal Saturday, completely normal Saturday. Elder Choi stepped toward me, his gray robes rustling softly. His expression had shed its formal neutrality, and what was underneath was something much simpler. Grief. Fondness. The particular look of an old man honoring a promise to an older friend. "Your grandfather," he said quietly, "told me once that you were the finest thing he ever built." He paused. He meant that as the highest possible compliment. My throat tightened. I know, I said. He told me too. Elder Choi nodded once, deeply, the way men of his generation nod when words stop being sufficient. Then he stepped back and gave me the only thing a hall full of witnesses in formal proceedings could give me right now. Space. I stepped off the dais. Sung Min reached me first, which was correct and inevitable, and I let him pull me into a tight, wordless hug that lasted exactly as long as I needed it to. His thoughts were warm and full and completely incoherent with relief, and I didn't filter any of it. Quietly, into his shoulder. You were right about the red bean rice cakes. He laughed, startled and genuine. I am always right about the red bean rice cakes. Don't let it change you. He pulled back and looked at my face with 11 years of knowing me behind his eyes. Are you okay? Pause, honest. Ask me in an hour, I said. Right now I'm something better than okay. I'm free. His smile was the widest I had seen it in months. The pack members were beginning to move, the formal stillness of the hall dissolving into the quieter, more human noise of people processing something unexpected. Some approached me with careful words, elders who had known grandfather, cousins whose thoughts were loud with protective fury on my behalf. I received all of it with more grace than I expected to have available. Eventually the hall thinned, and I found a quiet corner near the chrysanthemum pillars, and finally, with steady hands, took out grandfather's letter. The paper was cream-colored and slightly worn at the fold, like he had written it, sealed it, then held it for a while before passing it on. His handwriting was exactly as I remembered. Unhurried, certain, Dae-oh. If you are reading this, then the thing I feared came to pass, and you handled it. I know you handled it because you are a Shin, and more than that, you are yourself, which has always been more than enough. I want to tell you something I should have said more clearly while I was still there to say it out loud. Your ability is not a burden. It is not an invasion or an inconvenience or the reason people keep their distance. It is the most honest thing about you. You hear the truth in everyone. The tragedy is that you spent so long protecting others from that gift that you forgot to use it for yourself. The men I sent, trust them at the pace that feels right. Not faster, not slower. They are good. Dae-oh. I checked. You know I always check. Build something beautiful now. You have everything you need. All my love, always. Grandfather. I folded the letter carefully, pressed it once against my chest. I know you checked, I said, to no one and to him specifically. You are so insufferably thorough, and I miss you every single day. Taeyang found me there, then Hyunjae, then Seok-hyun, who had somehow located actual barley tea from the catering table and brought 4 cups, which I decided was the most quietly perfect thing anyone had done all morning. We stood together near the chrysanthemums and drank tea in the dissolving light of the ceremony hall, like that was a completely ordinary thing to do after dismantling a fraudulent bonding claim on record. So, Hyunjae said, his sharp features carrying the closest thing to sheepish I suspected they ever managed. This is a strange way to meet someone. Objectively, I agreed. For what it's worth, Seok-hyun said, his warm voice unhurried. Your grandfather talked about you constantly. We knew you before we met you. Good things, I hope. He said you were the funniest person in any room you entered, Taeyang said, and that you pretended not to know it, which made it funnier. Genuine and unguarded. Something shifted in the space between us when I laughed. Not dramatically, not with ceremony or declaration, just a small, quiet shift, like a window opening in a room that had been closed for a long time. Taeyang's thoughts were steady and warm and unhurried. There it is. There's who he actually is. Hyunjae's were precise and a little surprised at themselves. I was not expecting to want to make him laugh again. Noted. Filed. Sokyun's were the simplest. Chol-su. I understand now. I completely understand. I looked at these three men who had shown up for me before I knew I needed them, who had honored a dead man's love by protecting someone they had never met, who were standing in a hall full of chrysanthemums, drinking barley tea like they had nowhere else to be. I thought about what grandfather had written. Trust them at the pace that feels right. I want to say something, I said. All three of them looked at me. Honest, unhurried. I don't know what this is yet, between any of us. I'm not going to pretend I do. I held my teacup with both hands. But I know that my grandfather trusted you, and I know what it cost him to ask for help, because I know where I got my stubbornness from. So, thank you for being exactly what he believed you were. Taeyang looked at me for a long moment, then quietly, he said the same thing about you. Outside through the high hall windows, Seoul was bright and unhurried and enormous. The Shin compound still stood on its hill. The mountain territory was still intact. The northern land was still mine, and my grandfather's archive, and every room that had ever held his voice. All of it still exactly where it belonged. Looking at the three of them. And for the first time in 4 months, the future did not feel like something to survive. It felt like something to build. With everything, grandfather had always known. For once in my life, I was glad I hadn't read his mind. Some gifts are better as surprises. And that, everyone, is where Dae-oh's story finds its light. Not in a perfect ceremony, not in a flawless bond sealed without scars, but in a hall full of chrysanthemums, a letter from a man who loved him without condition, and 3 alphas who showed up because someone good had trusted them to. If this story moved you, surprised you, or made you feel something you weren't expecting today, you are exactly the person this channel exists for. Hit that subscribe button right now. More stories like this one are coming. Stories with sass, soul, slow burn, and twists that will make you put your phone down just to stare at the ceiling for a moment. You've been an incredible audience. Genuinely. The fact that you stayed from that corridor wall all the way to grandfather's letter, that means everything. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs a good story today, and we will see you in the next one. Dae-oh would want you to stay.